Hello, today we are going to show the new DHCS 1737 web form. This form will be available on our website via a URL. Simply clicking on the URL or navigating to it will open up this form, and you can submit your DHCS 1737 forms as needed. To review the form, we're going to go ahead and simulate a submission using test information. Immediately you will see this county information section and the submitting county beneath it. This is a drop down. To interact with the drop down, you click into it and you could scroll and select the county you want to pick. However, if you know information about the county, like the name or the number, you could quickly search it just by typing it in and it will present the applicable options to you. The next field is a checkbox prompting the user if the provider is a satellite clinic. What this does is that this changes the requirements for the provider number. You will notice this takes a certain amount of digits or in characters here. If you select this, it changes, allowing for a dash and 2 more characters. Here are some file uploads. You'll be seeing these throughout this form in different places. Each one of them requires a submission or an upload. And I'll quickly do that. You can drag and drop into these. However, I'm using the select file option on here to push in these items. Keep in mind, if you forget to upload a document to each of these, you will be prompted before you can fully submit your form with an error saying you need to upload to all applicable file uploads. The next section is the provider information section. One note here, you will see these little gray eye icons here to the right. This is intended to help you fill out the form, as they are little tooltips that help guide you in filling out this form. I will quickly enter some pre-saved information into these fields. The note I want to talk about here, though, is the zip code. There are 3 acceptable formatting options for the zip code. We have what we see here, which is the simple 5 digits. However, we can also take the dash or the space. Those are acceptable formats and will not throw out errors. However, if you do make an error when entering it in, it will throw a little guidance here for you. A little error will pop up and it will tell you what it's looking for. For the time being, let's stick to the 5 digits for this submission. The next section is the services provided. We will click a residential and an outpatient. When you click any residential option here, you'll be prompted to enter the number of beds. You cannot enter over 16. If you do so, you will be given an error, which we will fix and just make it 15. The next section here, we're going to be strategic here and click medication support, and we're only going to click this one for now. However, we're going to come back to this and revisit this in a moment. We have our evaluation criteria section. These are all checkboxes, which I will quickly go through and check just to fill them out. However, a few of these boxes do include secondary required fields depending on your selection. So for example, if you check number 2, what happens is that a file upload appears prompting you to add an additional document, which is great. Let's go ahead and attach a document here. There you go. Let's go ahead and continue on here. Let's fill out sections 3 and 4 just by checking these boxes. Section 5 is another option. When selected, you will have to attach an additional document. Let's go ahead and do that. Now, you might notice, if you're familiar with this form, that section 6 is not visible. This is by design. What triggers section 6 to appear was way back here, the medication support option. If you select the provider only stores or dispenses, let's scroll back down and see what it looks like down here now. Section 6 appears, and you could fill it out as needed. However, let's go back. For the purposes of this example here, let's keep it to medication support only and no section 6. Let's go ahead and fill out these date fields. I will note that these dates do require leading zeros if that is applicable. So, for example, 01 for January or 09 for the 9th. Not entering in the leading zeros can mess up the formatting, so be careful when you do this. I will enter in the name and title of the person, which in this case is just test user. And this pre-populated, this will not pre-populate for you though. You are expected to enter a valid email in here because communications will be sent to this email. Finally are the last two sections of selecting your role to sign. And if you cannot sign this form and you click this button, you will have to enter the email of the signer. So this can route to them and they can provide their signature. However, if that's not the case and you could sign, click one of these other two options, provide a quick signature, and click the attestation, I agree with this statement. Let's go ahead and submit. If there are no errors, what will happen is all these documents will upload and it will present the form submitted successfully screen. If there was an error, it would have taken us to the error in the form and we would have had to make a revision to submit. Now, that being said, when you do this, you will get this immediate screen here. However, you should see other outcomes here as well. Notably, you should receive a receipt. I will show an example here. Just so we're clear, the contents of this email are subject to change, as in the template itself. However, you will receive, at minimum, a ticket number. Currently, that is in the subject line of the email up here, which can be used for your reference and for tracking purposes. Additionally, you will receive a receipt of what you filled out in a PDF form. Let me pull that over onto the screen here so you guys can see it. There is a PDF version of what we filled out. Now, there are times when DHCS will request revisions or corrections to your submission. This is not uncommon. When this happens, you will receive an email. I will show an example here. This is a transmittal, 1737 transmittal corrections needed email. You will notice it has a ticket number in there. And you will also notice that there are the areas of concern that need corrections here listed. And all you have to do is click on this link, and that will direct you to an additional new form. Let me show it to you. Here we have the correction form, and the expectation here is you simply fill in the new information that differs from your original submission, and you will press submit. Once you press submit, you will be taken to this screen, and that will fulfill your correction for the time being. However, keep in mind, it is subject to DHCS review, and multiple corrections can be submitted for the same submission. Once DHCS has reviewed this information and it has passed their reviews, they will submit a completion email to you. You should receive it in your inbox with a final receipt of your 1737 submission saying it has been reviewed by DHCS, and some of that language is subject to change, so keep an eye out for that. I hope this was informative. Thank you for your time.